Hi, I'm James the Light Guy, and today we're taking a look at a pair of Koyoso LED replacement headlight bulbs. Let's zoom down on the box and see what comes inside. Alright, we get a little card with instructions on how to watch their installation video. The same product manual that we see in a lot of other LED headlight bulbs. These bulbs are available on Amazon. I will put a link to them in the description below if you would like to get them for yourself. These bulbs are in the bulb type H11. Let's see. We get two bulbs, and a couple of tools. Now we're going to get into these tools in a minute, but they're one of the features that makes Koyoso a little unique in a good way. So let's take a look at one of these bulbs in the same routine that we normally do, starting at the plug. Now, this has a standard H11 type plug. It's a fairly rigid plastic, and the positive and negative are clearly identified. We have limited strain relief here because it is a fairly sturdy plastic. It doesn't have much give, but as you can see, the wires are quite well protected by this braided nylon sheath. Up next, we have a small control box. This particular version is not CAN bus. Instead, this simply houses some electromagnetic shielding and other control components for thermal throttling and fan control. Very limited, well, non-existent strain relief on each side of that. Here we have the label, H11 6000K, 2020, April, and a bunch of numbers. Then we get to the bulb itself. Similar to some of the other designs we've seen, very, very little strain relief on the bulb. See if I can focus. There we go. We have what I initially thought was a punched fan shroud here, but if I can get the light on it just right, maybe you guys will be able to make out there are actually machining marks in this. Let me see if I can't. Give me 1 second. There we go. I think I have it focused down enough. You can see the concentric rings, tongue-tied, concentric rings from a lathe going around that. Another thing that sets Koyoso apart is instead of using a bronze bushing for their fan, they actually use, out of focus there, they use dual ball bearings for stability and longevity of that fan shroud, fan shaft. We have the same standard extruded aluminum heatsink here, and the H11 base plate. This one has a very soft green silicon gasket, and this is where that set of tools comes in. Now, ideally for these two-sided LED designs, you want to mount them with the chips facing in the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position in the housing. But depending on the position of these tabs, you may not always get that right. Well, Koyoso thought of that. They gave you an Allen wrench to loosen this set screw so you can remove this, it has a 4 points and a shelf that these little ear lobes rest on. So you can figure out that these lobes need to be on the top and bottom of the light. You can use this tool, which has 2 lobes, to install this in your housing and make sure that once installed, you can get that lip in the correct position. Then it's a matter of installing the bulb out by pushing it and twisting it into place. Then to remove, you can pop that out and use the tool to once again twist to remove this from your housing. Moving up the shaft, we have the central support column, which appears to be a machined aluminum with an inner and outer faceplate held on with 2 small Torx. And we have dual-sided CSP chips. Let's zoom in on those. All right, once I get the focus in here, there we go. You can see that unlike some of the other brands, these CSP chips are actually centered in their windows, and the substrate on the boards is copper to help transfer that heat down into the heatsink at the bottom. Zooming back out, you can see that we don't have a very wide body. It is a bit tall, especially behind where it mounts in the housing. So depending on how large your dust cap is or space that you have in your engine compartment, that fan is fairly tall to move a large volume of air and could cause some fitment issues. Speaking of moving a lot of air, these fans are surprisingly loud. Let's hook one up and take a look. Turning on our bench power supply, you can see that we are currently at 2.6 amps, and that is going to drop down a little bit. Let me bring this bulb close to the microphone. You can hear how loud that fan is. And we have a very pure white light with a pretty decent dark spot here. But again, if we follow their instructions, mounting this in the 9 and 3 o'clock position, we'll see how well that shadow is taken care of in a housing. So this is currently at about 2.5 amps, which puts that at around 36, we'll go with 36 watts of power. This should stabilize around 35. The listing marks it as a 40 watt LED, and this one could just be running a little low. I would believe it. The rest of their claims so far seem to be pretty on point. Now, we'll see if it is 3 times as bright as the halogen bulb that we measured in our standardization tests. Let's grab our light meter and our light box and take a look. Now that we have our light box out, we're using our ×10 function on the meter. We will again be putting this in with the dark spot facing the meter exactly, and then rotating this 90 degrees to get the maximum amount of light pointed at the meter. Let's turn on our power supply, and in it goes. So at its darkest, we have about 320, we'll go 320 as it's stabilizing, and we'll rotate to brightest. We have 1,280. That is not too shabby. Compare that to the halogen markings. I will put the ratings up on screen. And let's move on to our wall to see what we can do about this dark spot in a beam pattern test. We now have the Koyoso H11 LED mounted into the Subaru Crosstrek reflector housing. We are drawing about 2.5 amps. And while lined up with that support beam, we are about 4 meters away from our light wall. Taking measurements starting in this position, this would be oncoming traffic with the beam pattern lined up at the top here and centered. This was 100 lux. The center dot here, it's actually a bit difficult to see. Right in here, this one measured at 580 lux. This lower one here at 300, and this one was below this cutoff line and only registered 20 lux. This one over here off into the trees also registered at 100 lux, making this a very even spread left to right and surprisingly powerful until this cutoff down there. I am amazed in a reflector housing how well this beam pattern went. And we also had very little light bleed off above the cutoff line. Let's move this into a projector housing and see how it fares. Still drawing just shy of 2.5 amps in the projector housing. Lined up with our post, we can see that our cutoff is exactly the same. Moving to go through the same steps. This point over here measured in at 120 lux. This point measured in at 900 lux. This measured in at 400, and this one at 40. Moving off to the side here, this one only measured in at 150 lux. So this one, unlike the reflector, seems to have a bit more of a hot spot here and a little more power over here, but that might just be due to this cutoff line being slightly higher on this side and dipping down. You can see that there is this dark spot in the middle here on the passenger side. Let me see if I can show a couple pictures of it on an actual street, and then we'll head back to the studio for our conclusion. Let's come up with our conclusion here. These are fairly inexpensive. They're entry-level price at $40 for the pair on Amazon. And as we saw from our beam pattern tests, they are a very even light. They appear to do better in reflector housings than projectors for an even spread of light, but in either case, it looks like they would do better than halogen. The alignment tool that they come with makes it very easy to adjust the beam pattern to get it just right for your vehicle, which is another great plus, and I wish more manufacturers did it. I only have two potential issues. One is that it is not a CAN bus system, so if you have a Dodge or Mercedes, it may flicker and you'd have to get a CAN bus adapter or decoder for your vehicle. And the second is this fan moves a lot of air and is fairly loud, but with this limited sized heat sink, these bulbs did get warm during my testing. LEDs are pretty susceptible to heat damage if they get too close to that threshold. It's kind of like glass. Glass can be tempered glass, like a door window is really strong. You may have seen videos of people smashing into them with their face or their fists on YouTube, and those windows don't budge. But once they fail spectacularly. Once this bulb gets hot, that's it. These chips will die and there's no recovering from it. So I would have liked to see a little bit better heat dissipation. It did transfer a huge amount of heat to this heat sink where the fan was doing its best to take care of it. But I'm currently in a pretty warm climate right now, and temperature-wise, I'd be a little concerned if it were any hotter. If I was running these perhaps during the day with automatic headlights in the heat of summer, it may cause an issue. But I really like these bulbs. Since I don't have the limitation of space in the back, I will likely install these into my motorcycle as the low beam and high beam, because they have an excellent beam pattern in the reflector housings that my motorcycle has. That, and being an LED, gives you that instant on full brightness that is very useful for high beam. But that is all I have for today's video. If you enjoyed the video or found any of the information I provided useful, give me that thumbs up and consider sharing with your friends or family. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel and would like to see more content like this, consider subscribing. And until next time, I'm James the Light Guy.